That's right. Chris is going to pull up a song for us. I want us to look at a song before we get into our class. This is my Father's world. Read the lines with me. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. The birds their carols raise. The morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. Go ahead and go to verse 3. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me ne'er forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. And notice the refrain. This is my Father's world. The earth and heaven declare his wonders here, his glory there, for he is everywhere. That's right. Thought of that song this morning at 2 o'clock. Here we sit, blessed, with every blessing that we could imagine, with everything that we could have. We're going to spend some time this morning talking about a word that, well, I don't know if I've said out loud in quite a while, but materialism. We're talking about a class that's describing things that the church is going to face. And recently I was given a question, and I want to respond to that question before we get into our topic. Why that class in this room? Someone online commented, and it was a great comment. Most of us in our 50s, 60s, and 70s may not be here much longer. Why this class now? I believe when you look at this class, and I encourage you to look around, you see a core of people who have been there, done that. But here's what you see even greater than that. You see a core of people that can still influence the next few generations. And thus your wisdom can influence, as we've been discussing in this class, the next 20, 30, 40, or 50 years, maybe longer. I believe this topic will have less to do with you than any topic that we're going to study in this class. However, it still affects every person in this room. We've already noted, even in our prayers, we live in the land of plenty. Vehicles galore, homes with all the furnishings that we would ever need, and many with furnishings that we just do not need, and we have things in abundance. Think of this building right here. It's been here for years, hasn't it? And it still provides us the comforts that we need. Yes, we do. We do. No, we don't. Because as far as we understand, it always has been. Now, there are some of you that grew up in an era of which where it was always maybe not. But for the last at least 30 years in this country, we've had what we needed, haven't we?
Well, let's not forget, God giveth and God can taketh away.
We've been blessed to have what we need. We've been blessed to have more than we need. This is evident if we'll all just walk through our homes. Do you have a room in your house where all your extra stuff goes? Maybe you call it a closet or a storage room or that space in the attic that everything just ends up there. We live in the land of plenty. Go with me to 1 Timothy chapter 6, and I want us to see a principle that will define some things for us, and we're going to look at a principle in this class and a principle in the sermon hour that's going to have to deal with both of these discussions. We're going to spend some time really in all three lessons of today at East Hill in this class, worship hour and tonight's worship hour. We're going to talk about the heart. During the sermon hour, we're going to talk about our words. Our words reveal our motives, has to do with the heart. Tonight, we're going to look at the fact that Jesus was our example in overcoming temptation, but in reality, what we're doing is we're looking at the heart. And in materialism, guess what? We're looking at the heart. When you go to 1 Timothy chapter 6, 1 Timothy 6, look at verse 2. We're going to read several of these passages till we get to a point where we understand something. Notice with me verse 2. And they that have believing masters, let them not despise them, because they are brethren, but rather do them service, because they are faithful and beloved, partakers of the benefit. These things teach and exhort. If any man teach otherwise, and consent not to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which is according to godliness, he is proud, knowing nothing, but dotting about questions and strifes of words, whereof cometh envy, strife, railings, evil surmisings, perversive disputings of men of corrupt minds, and destitute of truth, supposing that gain is godliness. From with such withdraw thyself. And notice verse 7 very carefully. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. Verse 10. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. I know that in this country we still, and even to this day, still do this. But we still classify ourselves by how much money we make. There's the high income class, the middle class, and the low class. And in other words, that has to do with how much has an individual or a family unit brought in. And there are divisions for that, and it doesn't matter what they are. But I want you to notice what we do. We classify ourselves in this country based upon what? What's the reality of that statement? Money. We classify ourselves in this country, whether we put a lot of stock in that or whether we do not. We classify ourselves in this country based on financial wealth. Verse 7 in 1 Timothy 6 tells us a sobering reminder. Number one, it tells us when we entered into this world, we had nothing. And it tells us another reality. We can carry nothing out of this world. But it tells us a third sobering reality. There will be a day when we're not on this earth. In other words, another term that we do not like to discuss, death is a reality. We certainly do not like to think of our own deaths. But I believe it's good for the child of God to consider this fact. We will not be here forever. We will not be here forever. You can probably look around this room, for those of you that have been blessed to live your lives here, and you can see those that used to be here. I certainly can look at the congregation that I grew up in and see those that used to be there. A man by the name of Herbert, Miss Wilson, Charles. They were there. One man who served as the minister at East Hill long before I was even a thought was there as I grew up. And for almost 30 or 40 years he served there. And when he retired, he came back to what he called home. He's not there anymore. His wife is. There's something interesting about that man. When he died, his family split his library into 3 different areas. And 3 different people were beneficiaries of that library, and a portion of my library is of his. And I can open those books and see his name that he wrote in them. Charles Myers. The things that were important to him of this life were his books, not only his family, but his work. And when he died, he couldn't take them with him. Verse 7, a sobering reality. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. I want you to look at the word certain. It is a guaranteed fact that you're not going to be able to carry anything out. Now notice verse 8. Here's a reality. This should be reality. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. You see, we're going to spend time talking about materialism, but really we're not going to talk about stuff. That's what materialism is. It's the love of stuff, the love of money, the love of things, the love of possessions. What we really need to do is talk about a word that we just read. Therewith be content. You see, the root of materialism, the root of the love of things is the fact that most people are not content. I'm going to ask a question. I've asked this question before, but it really plays well into our discussion. There's a family whose name everybody knows. What's their name? The Joneses. How do y'all know the Joneses? Because in the life we live, there's now the expression that had to be created because everybody was trying to do it, keeping up with the Joneses. An uncle that everyone knows. I hadn't thought about that. Sam. That's good. Why do we know Uncle Sam? He has to do with money. It's impressive that when it comes to money, we know the names that are attached to it. You probably can think about money. Boy, that really worked out. I got money in my pocket. This was an accident. I'm glad it's there.
It's nice to have, but
$5 bill, who's on it?
Lincoln,
Why do you know that?
16th president of this country.
Money. What's in the back of this bill? What's written on it? God we trust. Materialism is a problem with contentment. Is there anything wrong with building a bigger home? No. Anything wrong with getting a bigger car? No. Anything wrong with buying furniture? Can there be anything wrong with it? There's the difference. When we lack contentment, because we're trying to keep up with a family that doesn't exist, we've become materialistic. But see, we do it in so many more facets now. It used to just be the home furnishings, and that was one of the scenes. There's a TV show I'm watching right now, and it was based off years ago, and the wife had the main floor redone, and she brought in someone to redo the floor, and she brought the husband in, and she says, "What do you think?" Now, the expression was all over his face. He didn't say it, but the expression was, "I liked it the other way." But the whole point of that scene was to show that people in that era and in ours were trying to keep up with the family with furnishings that they didn't really care for because somebody else had them. Contentment. It was a lack of contentment.
Well, let's not forget this. It's psychologically nice to try to keep up with the Joneses, but that Jones family may have a much better job, a much better pay, and you are at a lower level of welfare.
It's true.
But regardless of what level you claim to be on, whether it's $10,000 a year or $1 million a year, I feel that we are allowing money and wealth of nice things to get ahead of God.
That's very true. That's why he says, and he begins with 7 and 8, you bring nothing in this world, you carry nothing out. If you have food and raiment therewith, you find a way to be content. Now, why did he have to tell these people, you need to find a way to be content? Yeah, the love of it. That's the problem with materialism. It's not that stuff is a problem. It's not that televisions or new furniture or new houses or new cars are the problem. It's when we love them more than we love our Lord. He says, you brought nothing into this world, you certainly can take nothing out. If you've got food and raiment, find a way to be content. Now keep going with what he's saying, verse 9, and I want to make an application of verse 9 that we don't look at very often, but they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men into destruction and perdition. We base this country on a value system of low, middle, and high income class. But yet the lowest of our country is higher than many countries. I wish I'd gotten these out of my office, but when I went to the Philippines, I brought some money back with me, and I don't know if you've ever walked around with $100,000 in your pocket, but in the Philippines you can. There you are with this wad so thick you can't get it in your pocket. You've got to hide it in your room because you exchanged what you would call a normal amount of money, and you end up with something that you never imagined. You see, we live in the land of plenty. We live in a land in which this building can exist. Think of the size of this building. From the street there, 2 city blocks over, what have you got? A building. Look at our homes. I know the square footage of our home. And the square footage of the preacher's house in the Philippines, which was attached right beside to the church building, was half of my home.
Your house is not too far from here.
Not too far. We don't know how good we've got it. And yet, what do we want? As a country, we want more. Sometimes as a people, we want more.
Well, in a way, isn't that being kind of greedy?
Materialism is a greed. If you notice verse 9, but they that will be rich. It doesn't mean that all will be, but those that are going to be. And I would suggest that fits every person in this room. We don't understand how good we have it. They'll fall into a temptation and a snare, and here's where we start to get some ideas, and into many foolish and hurtful lust. The word lust is used in the New Testament in many areas, but talking about sin, talking about temptation, and we'll discuss this tonight in the book of James, we're drawn out after our own what? Lust. Many foolish and hurtful, read it this way, desires. Why? But they that will be rich fall into these things. Now hit verse 10 with this. Here's the why. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Money. I find it impressive that in the first century church, they had to be reminded that as we sing the song, this world is not my home. They needed to be reminded, as the song we introduced in this class, this is my Father's world. They needed to be reminded exactly what we need to be reminded of. But I want you to see some light at the end of the tunnel. We've been kind of harsh to a degree on this. Look at verse 11. Yeah.
What is that? Pierce themselves through many sorrows.
Pierce them through with many sorrows. I'm going to use an analogy here to help us understand that. Have you ever done something so good? It was good in its nature, it was good in its intent, and you thought it was going to be something that was wonderful, but it ended up becoming something that was sorrowful, something that you regretted. Here's the idea. All of this money, they thought it was going to make them happy. Statistically, go look at everyone that's won the lottery. There are reports that show their happiness after winning went down. They're filled with sorrows. Why? Probably. Oh, yeah. The sorrows. But I want us to see this. Pierced who? How does it read? They pierced themselves. Notice this is not something that someone else did to them. It was not something that money did to them or things. Who did it? They did. You know, when you place money as a priority in your life, what do you stop doing? You stop placing God as a priority in your life. You'll probably start placing your family in a second place of your life, maybe your spouse in a second place of your life, maybe those that love you in a second place in your life. And what usually happens is you drive yourself to be alone. Now, there are many other sorrows, I believe, that are covered in this. You look at the rich young ruler, the rich young man who went to his father, the prodigal son. Father, give to me all that is going to be mine. So he received his third of his father's inheritance. He left. He made great friends. When the money was gone, where were his friends? They were sorrows. What was he doing? Jewish boy, feeding what? Pigs. The antithesis of what he's supposed to be dealing with. Many sorrows. But I want you to notice verse 11 here. This is the beauty of this. But thou, O man of God, flee these things and follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. Fight the good fight of faith. Lay hold on eternal life, whereunto thou art also called and hast professed a good profession before many witnesses. The beauty of looking at materialism is that it doesn't have to be so. The beauty of looking at the love of money is that it doesn't have to be so. The beauty that looking at any sin is that it does not have to be so. Notice with me a few other passages as we make some application to this. Notice with me Philippians 1. Philippians 1. We're going to pick a few passages here. Philippians 1. I want you to begin with me in verse 21, and we'll go all the way down to verse 24. Philippians 1:21 reads this way, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But if I live in the flesh, this is the fruit of my labor. Yet what shall I choose? I want not. For I am in a strait betwixt two, having the desire to depart and to be with Christ, which is far better. Nevertheless, to abide in the flesh is more needful to you." What's the biggest problem with contentment? Materialism, the lack of contentment. Materialism makes us do this. I don't want you to forget Philippians 1, especially verse 23. The Apostle Paul wanted to go to heaven. He was tired. If we can say that anyone has worked for the Lord, it's him. He was tired. And yet, he wasn't willing to go home yet. It does. Verse 21, the purpose of our lives. "For me to live is Christ and to die is gain." Why is it in accounting terms? If you look at these original words, they're in accounting terms. They're financial terms. For me to live is Christ and to die is gain. Where's the real value in life? Our service to God. But I want to show you something else that helps us understand the real value of life. And this is where the bell has just rung, and I'll give us 3 minutes to understand this. Our value in life comes in our service to Christ. And our service to Christ is shown in verse 23 in our service to others. You want to know why we're worried about everything else? Why we get worried about money? Why we get worried about having the nicer home, the nicer car? It's because we've lost our focus. It's a contentment issue. It's a focus issue. He says, "For I am in a strait betwixt two." In other words, he's standing at the fork of the road, and on one side, his fellow Christians, of which could use a little help. And on the other side of this road is Christ, eternal rest. There's his choice. But he shows his service. It would have been much easier for him to desire, to long for his death. But he chose, verse 23, to have a better outlook in life, to look unto others. I want to tell you where I think the root of materialism, the root of lack of contentment, and one of the greatest problems that the church is going to face in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, people are going to be looking to themselves. How do we fix it? Well, we've got to understand verse 21 through 24. We have to understand that this life is much more than me. It has more to do with an I. I think the heart of contentment is destroyed in Philippians 1. Put your focus on something else. Apostle Paul says he'd rather focus on his fellow Christians, not on the things that would benefit him. Now, I know that's an eternal idea. It has to do with the physical life, too. Focus on the people. Focus on the work. Thus, these things that stand before us won't mean much at all, will they? I know we're out of time. I appreciate your attention and your conversation this morning. We will pick back up at this place next week. Thanks so much.